Hey guys, PIEGUYRULZ here with,
Nathaniel Bandy, what's up, guys?
and we are going to be talking about Nathaniel Bandy's least favorite SpongeBob episodes of all time in the first 3 seasons. It's an interesting topic, it always is, because not that the first 3 seasons are perfect by any means, but you'll find that, I don't know, people have really interesting picks for, like, the ones they don't like. Like, everyone has, like, that token, like, one or two that they don't like, or they don't like as much as other people, and for me, I think Bubble Buddy is one of those that, not that I hate, but that is, I don't really, I'm meh on it, and a lot of people really like that episode. People disagree with me about I Was a Teenage Gary, people disagree with me about, The Great Snail Race, and Party Pooper Pants as well, but not quite as much. So it is always interesting to see, like, which ones just don't resonate as much with other people. And you picked one from each season, which is nice and convenient here.
Yeah, that wasn't intentional. It just kind of happened. I guess just real quick, I should probably say that, these are my least favorite. I don't hate them. Just want to clarify that real quick. I know, honestly, it's very, very difficult to pick bad episodes for seasons 1 through 3. But my first pick is going to have to be Squeaky Boots. This is honestly the only episode from seasons 1 through 3 that I just don't actually enjoy watching. Like the other two on our list, I don't mind watching them as much, but this one I really don't like. First off, the squeaking gets so annoying. Like, I know, I get it. They're trying to give a point. They're supposed to be annoying. It's supposed to be annoying Squidward and Mr. Krabs. But for the audience, I think the squeaking goes way overboard.
I agree with you. I really do. Now, I rated this episode good, but I definitely concede that point 100%. The squeaking was too much. It was to prove a point that Mr. Krabs was annoyed, but, like, that is the entire episode. You never get away from it here.
Mm-hmm. It's not as bad as, like, the slide whistle episode. I mean, that was literally just torture. But This kind of reminds me of that, where the squeaking just didn't end. Mm-hmm. And I mean, yeah, it was used in different interesting ways. Like, of course, the scene with Mr. Krabs trying to close the window at night. That was really funny. But hearing SpongeBob at the Krusty Krab just constantly squeaking, not stopping, it got a little... It got to be a little too much after a while.
They could have varied it up a little bit too, because a lot of the squeaking is like the same sound. Mm-hmm. I don't think they just necessarily repeated the same sound effect, but they could have played around with it a lot more than they did.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the only reason? Not that that's a bad reason.
Well, another thing, I don't know if I'm so much more upset about this, but when Mr. Krabs eats the boots, he just looks so creepy. Like his behavior, like I get it. He's going insane listening to the squeaking. Like, I think anybody would in his circumstance. But he goes and eats the boots. Like, why would he do that? That it was really random, and I saw it as really creepy.
So yes, I mean watching it again, because I hadn't seen this episode in a long time. Probably not since I reviewed it. But yeah, this is a creepy, weird episode. I definitely agree on that. I think your feelings on this are how I feel about I Was a Teenage Gary, where it's creepy and weird, but in a it's just kind of an uncomfortable, like, not hitting the point kind of way. Personally, mm-hmm. I think that it's really cool. Like, I think that it's insane and over the top, and, like, probably would have disturbed me when I was younger. Maybe it did, but, like, I don't know, they go so overboard with it. I can't help but be entertained, and, like, just, like, I can't take my eyes away from it. All the pictures, all the, the faces that Mr. Krabs makes, and just, like, the zoom-ins and stuff, it's like paranoia fuel turned really high, and that is one of those things that, like, super subjective. Whether you find it off-putting, or you find it, like, enjoyably disturbing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, now that I think about I'm with Teenage Gary, I didn't like that episode as much. I found it a lot funnier than this one, but for the same reasons. Like, that episode just gets really creepy, but it's not necessarily funny per se.
It's like it's a sort of awkward creepiness that is definitely in both of these episodes. It's not like slasher movie, like very clever, like built up creep. It's just like, we're gonna show you like some really disturbing ideas and not really explain it. Like, what is that? What exactly is going on with Mr. Krabs here? Is he having like a stroke or something? Like, is he actually losing his mind? Is he ever going to be okay again? Like, they don't really I mean, it does get a happy ending, this one. Unlike I Was a Teenage Gary, there is a happy ending somewhat, I guess.
Yeah, kind of.
It's one of those SpongeBob endings. So anything else before I talk about what I like about the episode?
SpongeBob wasn't aware of how irritated Squidward and Mr. Krabs was getting, and it was very clear, especially Mr. Krabs. It was very obvious that he was not okay with all the squeaking. I mean, he ran into his office, he picked up the barrels to try to cover his ears, and SpongeBob was still just squeaking away, didn't take off the boots. So it's really hard to watch, someone like struggle so much from something that's so minor. Like, he could have just taken off the boots and everything would have been fine.
I would definitely agree with you in other episodes. I mean, SpongeBob's naivete has gotten on my nerves, definitely on more than one occasion. I think the justification here, whether you buy it or not, I think it's just that SpongeBob's in his own world. Like, he's just in love with those dang boots. And he doesn't hear anything anyone else is saying. He's just, doing his little boot thing.
Yeah, he's clearly paying no attention.
All right, so I got to give my obligatory spiel about why I think it's good. I will definitely agree that this is one of the weaker good episodes that I would consider good, and probably one of the weaker ones of season 1 as well. The squeaking is irritating, definitely. I don't really have anything to say to make it not irritating. That's one of those things that, yeah. I guess I should mention, because I never mentioned it in my review, and I don't know, did you pick up on this? It's somewhat of a parody of, like, Telltale Heart.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think about that.
The telltale squeaking, which is, that's interesting. That doesn't make it, like, good or bad. It's just kind of interesting that that's there.
Yeah, it's definitely a reference.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of what I go easier on the season 1 episodes because it's very, very hard. We had a discussion on your channel about how it's hard to put yourself in the perspective of someone playing Mario 64 for the first time. It's hard to put yourself in the perspective of SpongeBob being a show with 1 season. Right?
Yeah.
Like, this is around, like, the 8th episode or so, I believe. And so it's hard to put yourself back in that perspective, but I think when you do, it's not that I don't know. I'm not trying to say that, like, I go easy on it just because, like, it's in season 1. I go easier on it because it's more of a establishing episode. This is Mr. Krabs' first protagonist episode. This was the first time he was the protagonist, and one of the first times in the entire series that an episode wasn't about SpongeBob. There was, I think, 1 or 2 that were more Squidward centric, definitely. But it does that. It's different in that regard. And I mean, like, judging it compared to today, Mr. Krabs is actually, he's definitely cheap in the episode, but he actually recants. He actually learns a lesson. Like, that's amazing. He buys Pearl the boots at the end of the episode. I didn't remember that. He actually pays money to make Pearl happy. Like, how amazing is that?
And that's nice to see. I mean, like, again, this, I don't think this episode's terrible. There's just a few things about it that really irk me, but it does make me laugh. And Mr. Krabs learned something, which is really nice to see.
Not that it sticks, but yeah, I mean, and he also gives SpongeBob the paycheck. Like, he actually pays SpongeBob. Name me another episode in this entire series where Mr. Krabs hands SpongeBob money and it's not like a nickel. Like,
yeah, I know. I honestly can't think of any where he does that.
I'm sure there's like 1, but yeah. So I mean, that's cool, just from a perspective on that. And I do really like the art in this episode. But of course, the thing for me, it's funny. Like, Mr. Krabs falling out the window, because his foot gets stuck and he avoids the hole the second time, but then still,
he yells at the window. He says "Arr!" to close.
Like, there are some good jokes. It's not one of the funniest episodes out there, certainly not. But and there's also, it's one of those. I really like the whole sequence of SpongeBob showing off the boots, like, to Squidward, and then later in the episode.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of classic bits in here. Sponge boy me Bob. That's where this comes from. I say that line a lot for some reason, not in videos, but just in general, when talking about the show. And I think that's the only time it happens. And of course, it's a reference to the fact that SpongeBob's name was originally going to be Sponge Boy, but that was trademarked or something. There's also, like, when SpongeBob's going up and down on the boots and Squidward's head is shaking like crazy, and Krabs falling out the window. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I definitely, I can concede that it is one of the weaker episodes, and I can totally understand how you wouldn't like it, or how you'd think it's one of the weaker ones.
Mm-hmm.
There is something about episodes at the beginning of the run that establish things, because they do things that were never done before. They are new and fresh in that way. That, but when you think about it like that, a lot of things that in a contemporary viewing aren't as impressive are definitely, I think, good in the context that they were initially out. Anyway,
Hmm.
if that makes any sense. But I'm ready to move on if you are.
Yeah. So the next episode that I decided to pick was "I'm with Stupid," and in case anyone doesn't know, this is the episode where Patrick has to. His parents are visiting, and Patrick's afraid that his parents are going to think he's stupid. So SpongeBob decides, well, I'm going to act stupider. Sounds like a decent episode. But of course, Patrick just escalates it and makes it worse. And what I really don't like about this episode is, SpongeBob willingly decides to help Patrick, seem smart in front of his parents. But no, he has to stab him in the back, and he makes SpongeBob seem so stupid that, like, it's hurting his feelings. Like, he's making fun of how he looks for, like, no reason at all. And then it gets to the point where Patrick 100% definitely believes that SpongeBob is actually stupid. And, like, that was completely uncalled for. Like, I get it, that's the joke of the episode, but it's still hard to see SpongeBob trying to help Patrick, and then he just completely stabs him in the back. And, it's probably because Patrick's stupid, further proving that he really is that stupid, but, I mean, it still bothers me.
Well, I'm not going to talk too much about this, because this was, like, one of the first Spongy Bits I ever did was a discussion about this episode with someone who also did not like it. So you're in good company. There's a lot of people out there that don't like this episode. What I can say in its defense is that I think it's funny. Like, especially, man, the opening with, I got a note, and on the other side, it's a letter, and,
Yeah.
like, I mean, the funnel, I don't know that anyone could say that stuff isn't funny. Regardless of how you feel about the story, the jokes, I think, are there, and personally, the story stuff, I think, this is another one that, like, I think it gets a much worse rap in retrospect, thanks to Patrick's behavior in later episodes where he is just a pretty horrible person. This episode, in the original context of the first 3 seasons, looks more like an outlier, but when you view it in the perspective of Patrick being the way Patrick is in, like, seasons 6 and 7 and 8, it definitely looks more just like a trend and more just like oh great, we got this flavor of Patrick today.
It just doesn't look nearly as justified in this episode for Patrick to be a jerk to SpongeBob. And, like, I'm not going to lie, this episode is really funny, but at the same time, I still feel bad for SpongeBob.
It's one of those things that I agree that the story was not handled as well as it could have been. Personally, I think that if they had either made there be more of a better transition from Patrick, turning on his friend, or especially, I think that if they had just had an ending where SpongeBob, like, Patrick apologizes or something, just like one little final moment between the two of them where he's like, like, oh man, I went too far, or SpongeBob was like, I just gotta call, my parents are coming over, and Patrick, I don't know, does some sign showing that he's gonna do the same thing for his friend or something. Just a little sign of friendship like you get in other episodes where they're fighting, like, Driven to Tears, that's the one I was thinking of. Like, little moments like that at the end where that just shows they're friends again, that goes a long way. I think that this episode could have certainly used that. Patrick's stupid. Patrick is very stupid, and that's the way I choose to interpret it, that just, he's a jerk, he totally is, but it's more of him being just a complete idiot, and also more of him being really pathetic. Like, he's so pathetic that the second he thinks there's someone dumber than him, he has to rub it in.
Yeah.
Like, that's just kind of the way he is. And also, I think that the twist maybe makes it a little better, too, because this wasn't Patrick's actual parents thinking this about SpongeBob.
Exactly.
This was just two strangers. But I agree, there are story problems here. My defense is just that it's funny and that it's ironic, like you stated. And it's one of those things where this flavor of irony, you either like it or you don't. Not that you don't get it. Like, I'm not trying to claim that, you don't understand it, because you do. And that doesn't necessarily make it better just because it's supposed to be ironic. But it's one of those things where either you enjoy it or you don't. And I enjoy it, and I can totally see how others don't. Anything else to say about the episode?
The only other thing I can think of, this is very, very nitpicky, and I'm well aware of that, is the laugh sequence when Patrick and his parents are laughing at SpongeBob, where it gets all psychedelic.
Yeah.
I feel that it goes for a little bit too long. If they shaved off, like, maybe 2 or 3 seconds, I feel like that would have been a bit more satisfying, but that's very, very nitpicky.
I mean, I think that the episode could have used a little bit more time to wrap up. I mean, it's clear they wanted to go with the punchline at the end, which I can understand, and I both think that it's stupid and also pretty funny.
Hmm.
What they went with, the story doesn't really go anywhere once it gets going. There's not a conclusion. There's not, I mean, there's a conclusion for Patrick. There's not one for SpongeBob really.
Yeah.
And it just kind of needed that to cap out the story. It's one of those things where they just kind of, you feel like the writers just kind of got a little too carried away with the jokes, and
Hmm.
forgot that maybe some closure would be good for the story itself. But
Which it's understandable why they
yeah,
didn't do that because, I mean, Patrick was the main part of the story.
it's a
But
punchier ending what they went with. Like
yeah,
it's not, they didn't go with anything sweet or any. I mean, it's a little sweet, I guess. Him hugging his parents, but they went with the punchy joke ending instead of something that would have given closure.
yeah,
All right, so if you're ready to move on to the last one.
yeah. So the last one, again, trying to pick, like I was able to pick "I'm with Stupid" and "Squeaky Books" pretty easily, but I really had to, really think about what I wanted to pick for the last one. And I decided to go with "Party Pooper Pants." And the main thing with this episode that I really don't like are the patchy segments. I mean, they feel completely unnecessary. Like the episode itself isn't that bad. I do think it has some flaws, but the patchy segments, like there's no reason for it. I mean, I'm sure there was some sort of event going on when the episode originally aired, but
Well, I think you're hitting a little bit. See, I agree with you. This is one of the few I rated SpongeBob, and I stand by that. I think the big issue in this episode is just that it's light on content. There's other problems,
mhm.
but it's light on content. This should have never been a special. I don't think it was intended to be initially because
It doesn't look like it was gonna be. I mean, this looks like a standard episode.
the patchy stuff is longer, I think, here than most others, TV movies aside. I think it feels longer at least, and it feels like stuff like "Underwater Sun," like the song, which I like the song, but it feels completely just like, what does this have to do with anything? It just feels like filler. And the SpongeBob part of the story, I think, goes really slowly, like just ugh.
Hmm.
And it's just, it feels so gimmicky. It's like, why? Okay, so you can understand why the Christmas episode would be double length. You can understand why something as experimental as that might try to go double length. But like SpongeBob Throws a House Party is not really something that deserves it. And especially not with the jokes and how slow, and like everything in the episode feels slowly. Like the gag with him in the list, like that goes on, like
Yeah.
it didn't need to go on. It's not like unbearable, but it's like everything in the episode is like that.
And even the scene at the beginning too, like where he's at,
At the
at the
store,
store,
yeah,
like they could have cut out a lot of that.
they didn't need that.
The
Yeah,
part the
like,
part where the register was kind of funny, but like they really could have trimmed that down.
yeah, and especially because the conflict in the episode is another ironic one where SpongeBob thinks there's a problem with his party, but the only problem with his party is that he's not having a good time and he's not there.
Hmm.
That's the irony, is that he's the one ruining the party. But I don't think this irony works because the conflict, like in an already slow episode that doesn't feel like it need to be double length, the conflict is ultimately one that's all in SpongeBob's head. If SpongeBob just like dropped off the face of the episode halfway through, nothing would change. It wouldn't be any different. SpongeBob doesn't affect anything once he gets locked out. It's like
Yeah.
he's just observing it. You know what I mean? Like it's the way the episode is set up is just very not good. I don't think it's not conducive to the longer format.
It feels like there should have been something else in the episode. Like I do think it could have turned out really well, but like like you said, it does seem like there's a lot of filler for the same type of scenes going on.
Yeah, I mean it's like a lot of like SpongeBob looks in at the party and sees something happening and freaks out. They go on with the little cue cards. There's like a number of
Yeah.
jokes about that. And like,
For him trying to get back into his house, that was pretty long too.
yeah, I mean if it's one of the many specials that I think if it had been 11 minutes, I don't know if it would be good, but it would be a lot better.
Yeah.
And I agree with the patchy stuff that I don't think it's like awful, but like the patchy singing is cringy and just like this is stuff that had been done before. They've already, at this point, they've done the Christmas episode, they've done Shanghai, And it's like, okay, Patchy fights with Potty, and he walks around, and there's people in weird costumes. Like, it's been done. You know, I think what they did with him in The Sponge Who Could Fly, what they did with him there was interesting because they got him out of the house, and they actually made him do something, and he doesn't come back in the episode midway through. You know,
Yeah,
like
that's one of the few Patchy segments that I actually like because, you know, it was really varied. He was, you know, like you said, he was actually going out and doing stuff.
It just feels like it's too much. The gimmick was a little bit too much, and in an episode that is already like super slow and super drawn out and not needed, it just felt like even more not needed. As much as I like Underwater Sun. It's a fun music video, but like, does it belong in this episode? Not really. Does it have anything to do with anything? No. Like, it doesn't. Okay, sure, it's related to the band storyline in Patchy, but like, who cares? I have one more thing about the episode that I mentioned in my review. I didn't know, you didn't say it, so I didn't know if you picked up. I didn't like how jerky SpongeBob was here.
Yeah, he was very
Unpleasant.
bossy.
Yeah.
And then, you know, it would have been fine if it was like a character that we know is bossy, but SpongeBob's not like that at all. He's not a pushover like he was in this episode.
This felt like Squidward's house party. Like, I could have seen Squidward being that kind of like demanding, or Mr. Krabs where he's super cheap with everything, right? But SpongeBob, I'm not gonna say it's necessarily out of character because the character is very meticulous in what he does, and it's easy to see him getting, for lack of a better word, triggered over, you know, people not acting the way he does. But in general, he's a very easygoing character, and to do something like this, it has to be done in a very specific way, like Can I Spare a Dime, where SpongeBob is pushed really far, not just like people aren't partying the way he wants them to. It's a very weird conflict for the character, and combined with the other problems in the episode, it's off-putting, I think. But yeah, in terms of positives, I like Underwater Sun, and I agree that there are some jokes that are funny. It's not SpongeBob's best material by any stretch, but some of the stuff, like, you know, a few of the note card jokes and some of the stuff towards the beginning, with him talking to Gary, there's some okay jokes. It's not a humorless episode.
I feel like the beginning was probably the better half, and then the longer it went on, the worse it kind of got.
Yeah. Because it was just a lot of the party scenes and SpongeBob looking in, basically. Another thing that bothered me, I don't know if you noticed, was the mat. The key was under the mat gag.
Yeah.
There was no mat. There was never a mat. I don't know, maybe that's supposed to be the joke. I know the joke is supposed to be that, like, oh, there was an obvious solution to SpongeBob's problem, but, like, in no other scene is there ever a mat on the door. And it's like, is it that hard? Is it that hard to be consistent in your own episode?
Yeah.
You don't have to have a mat in any other episode. I don't care, but, like,
at least in the one where it's important.
Because it doesn't make sense. It's not funny that way. If it had been there all along, then it would be funny, but it just comes out of nowhere, and it's just eh. So if you want to check out Nate, he does a gaming channel. Recently he's been making a lot of Switch videos if you're interested in that.
Yep. Yeah, actually, me and Pie Guy did a really long discussion video on the Nintendo Switch, so if you guys want to check that out, you should totally do it.
And like I mentioned before, we did one on all the 3D Mario games, so there will be cards and links in the description and stuff. So, yeah, thank you for being on again, Nate.
Of course, thanks for having me on.
No problem. And with that, PIEGUYRULZ, out.
Bye, guys.